everyone. Welcome to my science journey. We are glad to have you here. Today, we are joined by an amazing human being who is also a mentor to me. She is called Dr. Carol Ibe. She is the molecular plant scientist. She is also the visionary leader and the founder for JR Biotek Foundation, which she'll be speaking to us about today. She has trained in Cambridge, in Oxford, and in Georgetown, and currently she's, pioneering the Roots of Resilience project, which should also be sharing with us more on that. And we are so glad to have her here. So thank you so much for accepting our invite and for being here with us today, Dr. Carol.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for having me. It's such a pleasure and honor.
Thank you so much. And everyone that is joining us today, also welcome. Let us know where you're joining us from on the YouTube page. So if you just type and say, I am Ruth, I am joining from the UK, we'll try to acknowledge you as we go on with the conversation. So yeah, please let us know where you're joining us from. So I'm gonna jump right in so we get to save on time. And hopefully while we, after a few minutes, I'm going to invite the rest of you to ask your questions as well. And then, yeah, we're going to see how the conversation proceeds. So we're going to begin a bit light. Just for you to think back, Dr. Carol, what is one surprising lesson that you've learned from, being a researcher in the lab and now leading initiatives that is touching thousands of people across the African continent?
Well, first of all, Ruth, thank you so much. It's such an honor to come to your show. And I'm so proud of you for creating this My Science Journey, such a fantastic initiative. And I wish you more strength as you go along, because you will be doing lots of great things. So I think surprising lesson, I think we learn, life is all about learning. And every step of the way, we learn something new. As a scientist, a bench sort of, that works in the lab or used to. For now, I don't do that, but I do engage in science in other ways. I think once you step out of the lab, as people who are scientists know, as a scientist in the lab, you're very focused on maybe one area of things and maybe sort of other areas as well. But you do have a way of working that is different, that is really focused on a particular topic, a question or research questions, and you're trying to get from A to Z and fast in a very fast-paced and evolving sort of system. But then once you sort of step out from there and leading initiatives like I'm sort of honored to lead, then it's slightly different. So science is still very much at the core of the work that I do. I'm a scientist. I'll always be a plant scientist, and I love science. However, you do have other skills that are now needed to deal with people, especially if you're looking to deliver impact in the areas of work that you are doing. And so the lesson is more that you now sort of move from this type of I'm a scientist doing this question, have to submit this by this and that, to like opening up to seeing other people, to listening to other people's perspectives, to really doing a slightly different kind of work where you have to be creative, innovative at the same time, understanding that you're working with people from different walks of life and you have to listen, be able to maybe not agree with everything, but
Yeah,
to
yeah,
identify what works in
yeah.
those situations and scenarios. So it's a different skill set, but I think all of us have that in some ways. Even as a scientist in the lab, you do have extreme discipline,
Mm,
knowing how to plan your work and being on top of things. As a leader who works more with people, then you're engaging people who may not necessarily speak the same language in terms of as a scientist. We work with farmers, we work with community, and so the ways we then work becomes a little different. So I think it's really life and evolving and transitioning from role to role, and you can sort of pick up new skills as you go along. I don't know
I
if I answered that question, but
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, and that's what we're gonna speak about, in terms of how you navigated from, moving through those transitions. But again, as you mentioned, there are things that, you build up, you get different skills from being different, in different positions, and that is what helps you in the long term, especially for this particular role that you have right now. And so if you think back and say you are not a scientist or on the path that you are on, what do you think you would have been, or what path would you have followed?
Well, I think I have the tendency naturally to do many different things.
Okay.
But I really love science. I've always loved science. I think if I wasn't a scientist and I couldn't go to medical school and become a medical doctor, which is sort of really in the area of sciences, I'd probably be a teacher, or I'll probably be someone who's creating some business. I don't know. I'm just someone who can do quite a lot of different things. And I do love to do different things because I get
Yeah.
bored quite easily.
Yeah.
So if I wasn't a scientist, I'm a scientist, but I'm not working in the lab as
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
scientist that I started off being
Yeah.
or wanting to sort of be. And I still love working in a lab. However, I think at some point in my career, I realized that, yeah, you're doing this really massive work around science, exciting, interesting, that could potentially save millions of people.
Yeah.
However, it's most times when you're in the lab as a scientist personally, it felt like it was this one area, this
Yeah.
is just one path.
Yeah.
And most times I didn't see anything else. I didn't even see people around
Mm.
me because it felt like you had this sort of strict regimen to like do this one, two, three, and get, the work done, publish this paper. And so all of that sort of took the joy a little bit out away
Yeah.
from me, because then on the other side, for the nonprofit work that I do, which I'm
Yeah.
sure we will talk about it, that's where I find a lot of fulfillment, because now we're working with real people. Not that
Mm.
you're not working with real people as a scientist, but when we do science, I think sometimes we forget that the work we do, actually, there are people on the other end.
Yeah.
The work we're doing could potentially impact
Yeah.
positively, whether it's in the area of addressing hunger or climate change or issues
Mm.
around health. Any
Yeah.
work we do in the lab has the potential
Yeah.
to change lives or make a difference. But I
Yeah.
think in the whole science environment or ecosystem, we sometimes forget, because it becomes competition, which can be good, but also not so good. It becomes pressure. It becomes expectations that are different for different people, and then you sort of lose the joy. I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm speaking for myself, in as
Yeah.
much as I love science. However, stepping out and working
Yeah.
with people, African scientists who work with farmers, you start to understand that there are actually real challenges that we can
Yeah.
solve with science. There are actually people who need these solutions. And so for me, being able to sort of transition
Yeah.
into just not doing one thing and doing more, like leading people,
Yeah.
mentoring
Yeah.
or scientists, the next generation. That's how we met, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And being able to encourage, inspire people to sort of assume a servant leadership,
Yeah.
to lead from a place of service and use the skills you've been given, the talents you have
Mm.
to impact the next generation. I think for me, that's something I would have found a space in. Also, I love gospel music, and I started a
Mm.
gospel choir, and I at least two of them. And so maybe, who knows, I could have just
Yeah.
been doing gospel choir directing. I don't know. But the thing is, with me, it's hard for me to just do one thing. I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's so much that I have been given and
Yeah.
I feel need to come out and be utilized for the
Yeah.
benefit of humanity, and also for the good of others.
And I mean, I totally agree. As someone that has closely worked with you, I have seen you in very many versions. And, I can totally agree about your multifaceted version. And that in everything that you actually put your mind to do, you just don't do it for the sake of it. You actually, put in the effort to ensure that it's thriving. And, I, together with 10 others, are benefits of who Carol Ibe is, and the visionary leader that you are. So I can attest to that, and to say on this platform, to publicly say again thank you for investing in the young generation of scientists. Just to mention it, that Carol Ibe was the one person that believed in me when I was thinking of graduate school applications. I had never thought of applying to Oxford until I met Carol, and she really, really pushed me during that process. So thank you so much. But just jumping back to our conversation, Carol, and just to remind everyone that on this particular series, we are speaking about leadership in science and how to navigate leadership in science. And Dr. Carol Libe is, our first guest for this particular series. series so that you note it. And in the next few months, we're going to be hosting other incredible African leaders. And so, Carol, I would like to invite you to speak more about how you moved into building the JR Biotek Foundation. How did the idea come up, and why did you think it was a good idea to actually, push through and to, transition it into what is becoming also the AGRIIP and Roots of Resilience project that you're pushing currently?
Absolutely. Ruth, you're fantastic. I mean, you already had everything you needed before Oxford. Oxford needed you. We just needed to make sure Oxford found you. But you're brilliant, and I'm ever so proud of you. Yeah, like I think, not I think, JR Biotek Foundation was birthed out of need, right? So I did my undergraduate degree in Nigeria. And when I went to the US to do my first master's degree in molecular biology, I realized that my undergraduate degree did not quite give me the skills that I needed to compete or to, yeah, it was very, for me, quite a shocking experience. And, during my undergrad, when you're graduating top three in your department and,
Yeah,
you feel like, yeah, I know, and then you come somewhere and the basic, fundamental basics of molecular biology, I didn't know them, and I
yeah,
hadn't been taught that. And it's not because we were less intelligent in our education system. It's just somehow
yeah,
our systems had not met up, to where the global, most other countries were at a time and even now. And so being at that university in the US, and struggling to honestly get the basics and to understand the concept of molecular biology and all of that was very shocking to me, and it was frustrating.
yeah,
And so that was when I realized that something is wrong somewhere, and there is a huge gap. And I didn't feel comfortable just getting the knowledge, growing in science in the US or elsewhere, and forgetting my roots or forgetting the other people who are coming up, right?
yeah.
So right there was when I said, wow, something has to be done. I need to set up something, an organization. I didn't know what it would be at the time,
Mm,
but
mm,
I will try to fill these gaps in the area of molecular biology, biotechnology. And so, but because I myself needed to close my own knowledge gaps as well, there's a huge hole. So I finished that master's degree, got a job as a researcher at the Naval Research Lab, working, in the area of molecular biology. And then for me, honestly, I could not rest
yeah,
without setting this up. So I kept going, and then I went to Oxford, got a second master's degree, and I just kept pursuing this knowledge, trying to fill these gaps. But even though I had the opportunities to do science and do other things, this idea did not leave me. So it became a part of me that you need to set something up to provide some level of training, capacity building, educational programs to undergraduates, postgraduates in African research institutions. And that's how JR Biotech was birthed. But it took a while. It took a few years. Yeah, at some point, I just had to do it. I thought I needed a PhD first to actually
mm,
set up the
mm,
organization, because it required a lot of scientific training and understanding.
mm,
But then something happened. It was a challenge that actually led to the blessing of me
mm,
knowing that actually I could just at least pencil down this desire in my heart that is not going away, this passion that I've tried to remove and it just can't leave me. That means
yeah,
I have to do something. And so that's when I started to put down at least what I thought would be the vision of JR Biotech Foundation. This was 11 years ago.
yeah,
But how I started then I was a biomedical scientist,
yeah,
and JR Biotek Foundation, of course, molecular biology is applicable in areas of applied biosciences, but I had thought at the time that biomedical science was where we needed a lot more of the molecular biology skills and training. And so the first workshop that I had summoned the courage to organize was in Nigeria, and I realized that over 80% of the people applying were involved in agriculture, either plant science or soils or things around that, which was also another shocking experience because I had thought we would have more people from the health because of, health challenges and so on. And
Yeah.
right there, that's when I made the decision, actually. You know what? I think with this organization, we need to choose a path. And
Mm,
that path, since it seems like the major need is in the area, at least for those who were applying and coming forward, were agricultural scientists, and the reason being that molecular biology could help to fast track like plant breeding processes, and because hunger is an issue, food insecurity is a major challenge, we need to address those, and science and innovation can do a lot in doing that. So that right there, I made that decision to now sort of pivot from
mm,
biomedical and move into plant science, apply to Cambridge, got the Gates Scholarship, and that's how I did my PhD. And honestly, until today, I really do appreciate that. And I love plant science. And that's something
yeah.
I wouldn't have ever thought of doing in Nigeria. Why? Because we have this sort of mindset around agriculture. And I think it's because people, having grown up in with lived experiences in farms
Mm,
and farmers, seeing the hard labor, the harsh climate that
mm,
our parents or grandparents worked in the farm, nobody wants to live like that. You know what I mean? And in a way that you're still working hard like that and still struggling to make ends meet. So it wasn't something of interest, at least to most of us at the time. But now I do enjoy
mm.
plant science and being able to actually use the skills, the knowledge, the lived experiences to make a difference to others across Africa.
Absolutely. And before I come back to JR Biotek and the impact that you've made so far, because we are speaking about plant science and the relevance, especially right now when the climate conversation is going on, what would be your remarks regarding what African scientists, especially those that are interested in this particular space, sort of like what should they focus on or what should they look out for when they are, in this particular space that is a bit of challenging, especially right now in the context of climate?
Mm. Yeah, the field of agriculture is important. It's very broad, it's very diverse. And I think with the African institutions, research institutions, the universities, like I said, I grew up in Nigeria and in high school,
Yeah,
agriculture is really sort of just put it was more like using manual labor, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
nobody liked that because it was extreme hard. Not that we don't like to work hard, but if you've seen someone else, in the bank as a banker and all of that, people
yeah.
it's
You're
something.
like, mm,
And also things that will pay you. So you're doing all this harsh, like my grandparents were farmers until they passed, right? And just seeing them work so hard, leave early in the morning, don't come back until like 6 p.m. Really, sometimes no food in between. They come back, grandma now starts to cook and all of that. And still, it didn't feel like they quite made ends meet until they passed, right?
yeah,
And so having that picture for us as agriculture has its own sort of negative connotation, will I
yeah,
say. However, what I learned coming out
yeah,
to the system is that there is so much more to agriculture,
yeah.
agricultural science, agricultural development than actually what we thought it was. So,
Mhm.
what I will encourage those who are interested in the area of agriculture is not just agriculture as agriculture. Maybe perhaps if we thought about the fact that there are over 740 million farmers in Africa
Mhm.
who produce over 80% of Africa's food supply, but
Mhm.
still more than 80% of them live in extreme poverty. If you
Mhm.
have this picture in your head and kind of look around our communities in Africa and see that this picture actually is true, right?
Mhm.
Then maybe if you would think of yourself as maybe a scientist in the area of agriculture or any other aspect discipline within this area, how can we start to close those gaps? How can
Yeah.
we start to address the issues of food insecurity, of hunger, of extreme poverty? But at the same time, understanding that climate change, the crisis is here and is not
Mhm.
really going anywhere anytime
Mhm.
soon,
Mhm.
right? The prediction is that since 1961,
Mhm.
food security, climate change has affected quite a lot of agricultural productivity, leading to lower yields and low productivity. And this is, you can see that floods, right?
Yeah.
Floods, you can see drought in some
Yeah.
areas. even where I'm from in Nigeria, sometimes the rain is coming, farmers prepare the land, and then the rain ceases, and then it's almost like drought, and then all of a sudden it's pouring and it's flooding. So and because Africa's agriculture is largely rain-fed, right? So you
Mm,
don't really get irrigation. I think the estimate is about 75% rain-fed, which means farmers need the rain. So if the rain
mm.
does not fall, there won't be food, right?
Yeah,
So for that reason, if we would think about
yeah,
that and say, well, maybe there's a contribution I can make in the area of agricultural science and innovation. What is it that I can use my education, talent, skills in the area of this agriculture, whether it's
yeah.
plants or soils or even securing biodiversity? We're losing a lot of our African crops.
Mm,
In fact, I don't know if we have a database to know how many African crops, indigenous crops, herbs, tree crops, fruit crops that we have.
mm.
What are we losing due to climate change? If we would
Yeah,
think about those foods that we like and how can we safeguard them? How can we preserve them? How can we add value to them to feed the continent and also to create employment opportunities for people to have sustainable livelihoods? Maybe that could inspire someone to
yeah,
go into agricultural science because
yeah,
there's so much you can do with it. It's not just farming,
yeah,
actually. It's
yeah,
I'm a plant scientist, so
yeah,
I look at how diseases affect plants and what can we
yeah,
do to sort of create plants that are more resilient against diseases, which are now driven by climate change even more so.
yeah.
So once you think about that, maybe that could give someone an entry. But again, it depends on what people want to do and where they see themselves.
Absolutely. I hope you've all had that. So I'm just gonna give you 1 minute to take a breather and acknowledge a few people that have messaged on the chat. Welcome Lillian from Kenya, Lina from Kenya. We have a lot of Kenyans here. Anita from Kenya. Welcome, guys. We are glad to have you here. Keep letting us know where you're joining us from on the chat box. I would try as much as possible to acknowledge you as we go. Also, remember to type your questions for Dr. Carol on the chat. I see we are already 20 minutes past, so when we hit the 30 minutes mark, I'll start taking reading your questions. So if you have any question, 159. Sorry about that. If you have any question, this is the time to start typing it. So yeah, let's go. So coming back to you, Dr. Carol, and thank you for sharing that, sort of like different ways in which people could be involved in sort of like agriculture and sort of like, plant sciences. And I would like you to speak about, the Roots of Resilience projects that you've recently started as part of AGRIIP and how sort of like people can get involved in that if there's opportunities for that. But generally, just speak to us about that particular project.
Right. So we have currently, like in March, when we celebrated our 10th year anniversary as an organization, we call the event Roots of Resilience. And how did that come about? I mean, looking back at the journey, how we started, we had to be resilient in some form to be 10 years. And that's because we're in an area of need in terms of education, capacity building, scientific training in the area of modern molecular biology and applied biosciences to build that capacity in African research institutions by training African scientists. But what you would see and what I experienced leading the organization is an area that doesn't quite attract funding to support. It
Mhm.
doesn't quite attract the type of support that you will think that education should be attracting, particularly when you think about training the next generation of African agricultural scientists to
Yeah,
address issues around hunger, malnutrition, food insecurity, climate change, loss of biodiversity. You would think that should be at least at the forefront of, global research and development funding or support. But no, it's not. It's education, it's capacity building, and some think, well, it takes time, so we can't really support it. We want more like innovations that are popping out of the oven just like that. But the thing is, you can't really, it will be difficult to start to create those types of innovations that we need to address these issues if we neglect education or if we think it takes too long to build
yeah,
capacity on the continent of Africa to enable the Africans to develop and lead their own research agenda. So anyway, over 10 years, we have trained hundreds of scientists, over 270 in person, and this is across more than 20 African countries, and
yeah,
reached thousands virtually But we have come to a place again where we have taken surveys, we have asked questions, we have had focus groups discussions to understand how the training we're given, which is in the area of molecular biology to apply in the plants sciences or crop sciences, how is it helping the researchers that we've trained? And over 80% of the people that we surveyed, our alumni or those who have been involved in our training, said yes, we gained a lot of knowledge, but unfortunately we cannot apply them because we still don't have the infrastructure. The labs are still not there. There is no effective funding mechanism for most of the scientists in African research institutions to be able to do their research the way that we would do it here. Lack of limited access to consumables, to reagents, and in fact, some of the participants of the survey would say that they actually pay out of pocket, right, to fund their PhDs, to buy reagents, and they have to order it. It has to take 6 weeks. They have to send data outside of the country, and sometimes it does not come back to them.
Yeah.
So for us, we had to sit around to say, okay, should we keep training? And we will continue in the next 100 years. How will that actually address the hunger gaps in Africa? And so that led to this new initiative, which is called the Agri Innovation and Impact Project, just AGRIIP for short. But then the name is Agri Innovation, Agricultural Innovation and Impact. How can we now use what we have? We've trained loads of scientists, given them skills, but how can we scale this up in a way that we're forming better linkages between African scientists, institutions, and farmers? The
Yeah.
farmers actually grow a significant proportion of Africa's food supply. How can we build this linkage in a way that there is a cross communication that can lead to new innovations that are practical, relevant on the ground to solve some of the issues that we're addressing? And so we've launched this project in March.
Yeah.
During the Roots of Resilience summit conference that we had in March. And we're really excited because now we have a team of about 25 volunteers who are now working
Wow. Yeah.
to deliver and deploy AGRIIP in a handful of African nations during the first 2 years, the pilot. And
Yeah.
really, our goal is to support 10 million farmers in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And to, launch 1,000 sustainable ventures. We are looking at improving 30 African indigenous groups that have been historically underfunded, undervalued. And we are looking to empower 10,000 African scientists in African research institutions. It's a big vision, but to be honest, if you look at the number of farmers we have in Africa, over 740 million, and
Yeah.
this is both crops and livestock,
Yeah.
and then you're looking at 10 million over 10 years. That's just Nigeria alone.
Yeah.
I'm from Nigeria. Just Nigeria. I mean, 10 million farmers could be maybe a couple of communities. So
Yeah.
it sounds a lot, but it's
Yeah.
not a lot looking at the scale of the problems that we're looking to achieve. So this is how AGRIIP has come about. Now, Roots of Resilience itself is
Yeah.
the moral anchor
Yeah.
to the project, because what we've seen over time, even as a scientist in this part of the world, is the way we do science is interesting. It's
Yeah.
great, it's stuff, but sometimes we forget the people,
Mm.
beneficiaries, the lives that are connected to the science that we
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
so, from agricultural development or innovation, we have to think of what is morally, ethically correct and
Yeah.
right. How do we have a mutual, respectful platform where we're engaging farmers as equal knowledge co-creators? Rather
Mm.
than those who are sitting, we come, we take data, we run, we make our new innovations, we publish
Mm.
papers, and when we send
Helicopter
it back
science.
to them, and then we then come back and create the stats that are still poor. I don't want that personally. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's called Agri Innovation and Impact. So we want to see impact on different fronts at different levels, engaging farmers equally and co-creating with the farmers. So that way, what we're creating is based on their need, based on their demand, is demand driven, is relevant, and is actually addressing those gaps. So this is how these projects have come about. I'm so excited about them.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, thank you for shedding light on this. And I mean, I'm gonna come back to if just to ask you about how people can get involved in case there are people that are interested in this. But again, I love the whole idea about, co-creating with the farmers and not treating them as just like, will come and get your data or collect your samples and then disappear. So I love that angle that you brought within the agriculture impact and innovation project. So Carol, is there ways that other people can get involved for now, or would there be like an opportunity later on?
Absolutely. So we've just onboarded about 20, like I said, we're about 25 now who are working at this very initial phase to flesh out what this project will be in the different countries where we're going for the first 2 years. But there is definitely an opportunity. We're currently a volunteer-led organization.
Yeah,
And so if in the next, maybe next year sometime, once we sort of tidy up this first phase
yeah,
with the new members, we will be making another call for volunteers because now we're also expanding to set up in Nigeria and Kenya, and
yeah,
we're looking at going to those different countries to pilot, which means we need more hands.
yeah.
AGRIIP is a very interesting project. It's multidisciplinary, it is multidimensional. So we have art.
Mm,
As part of it, we're using creative art to
yeah.
recreate narratives around African crops,
Mm,
African livelihood. What does flourishing of life mean to a farmer,
mm,
right? And what does that mean to a scientist? And how can we join up these types of understanding perspectives to start to address issues, the roots of the problems of hunger and food insecurity in African nations? So yes, there will be tons of opportunities.
yeah.
Even right now, we might be looking for a couple of helping hands in the area of fundraising because we do need fundraising efforts to help us to get the funds that we need
Yeah.
to support this multi-dimensional, multinational project. And so, if you follow us on LinkedIn, that's the quickest way. We're also on Facebook. We're on other platforms, but LinkedIn, Facebook are the where we're most active. Instagram as well. And then we have a website, JR Biotek Foundation. .org. So if you Google us, you will find us. And so you also have an opportunity to join our newsletter. So we have a newsletter call on the website. If
Yeah.
you join our newsletter, you will get information about the next phase of the project and how you can be a part of it.
Involved. Yeah, absolutely. And also just to learn about the project and what is happening so far as well with regards to the project. So yeah, make sure to follow JR Biotek on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram as well. And look at their website. And Carol, speaking about multidimensional aspect of the project, of this particular project, I know it would involve several continents and institutions. What would you say are leadership practices that have helped you kept these partnerships? I mean, I don't know whether to term them equitable, but to keep the partnerships working so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my role at Cambridge University at this time involves equitable partnerships and
Yeah,
finding better ways to
yeah,
sort of harness how or improve or rather boost, what's the right word now,
yeah,
how partnerships work, particularly between Global North and
yeah,
Global South
yeah,
research institutions. And we know there are power dynamics there.
yeah,
There are issues when it comes to power influence, who owns
yeah.
knowledge, whose knowledge is considered valuable, and which one is accepted or not meant to. So there's quite a lot happening. Then within the African space, it's also similar. There are power
Mm,
dynamics there that need to be navigated in order for equitable relationships to be formed. However, like people would say, is anything like equitable partnerships? I mean, we like to use that word as a buzzword, but does it
yeah,
exist? Is there anything that is equitable? And what does equitable mean
yeah,
when it comes to research partnerships? So the way that we have worked, and personally, because I am so passionate about this cause, the cause being that I do not think it's actually fair or morally right to have people still going to bed hungry, and
mm,
in the millions. The stats is that 1 in 5 Africans go to bed hungry every night. I mean, that for me, it's still this is 2025, and we're still
mm,
talking about that.
mm,
And when you look at the real picture, the farmers who actually grow a significant proportion of Africa's food supply, actually, they feed the continent, but the gaps are so much, right? Demand is more than consumption. And so Africa has to import, I think, over 75 billion US dollars every year to import food to feed the continent. Whereas
Mm,
you have millions and millions of farmers who actually produce food. And so that drives me. How is
mm,
it and what is it that we can do with what we have to
mm,
address some of these issues at the community level, at the different levels where we can? Now, over the last 50, 60 years, there's been quite a lot of investments, research and development funding going into Africa to, reduce hunger, boost food security. And 1 in 5 Africans are still going to bed hungry. And malnutrition, we're not even talking about that yet in
yeah.
2025. So all these investments and so what is it that we can do? What is it that we can do differently? And what
Mm,
I have come to see in the work that we do as JR Biotek Foundation is being able to tap into diaspora expertise, but also work with those on the ground
mm,
way that is mutually respectful and a way that is morally, ethically correct, right in some form. And then working with partners and individuals where we have built a level of trust. So now most of the volunteers we have in the institutions that we partner with in Africa have been through our alumni. So those who have come through our programs, we've gotten to know them. They have come in with their talents, their gifts to serve, to work, to help to move this work forward. And so you get to know people and you can form that trust relationship, which is where the equitability can come in. Because if you have equity in research partnerships, there has to be trust, transparency, honesty. There has to be a way of relating and engaging with people in a way that is respectful. That is also a way that you're not coming to give them and say, well, I know what you need, take this, but rather to say, well, I may have an idea of what you
mm,
need personally because I grew up in Nigeria. However, I don't want to assume, having been out of Nigeria for 2 decades now, that I actually really know what that farmer needs. So, how can we create a platform that is equitable, that is respectful, that is a platform that allows people's voices to be heard and
yeah.
amplified? So we can sit together, we can listen to each other, and then we can find ways to co-create what actually works for the people, right? And so that's how we've engaged partners. We have the opportunity to have so many partnerships, but we're very careful. We're very careful, not because of lack of trust, but we
Mm,
don't like to bite more than we can chew at a
yeah.
time. So we walk through these partnerships based on relationships we formed, partnerships that we have tested and we know they work, and we know that they have equally similar commitment level, the passion, the interest in there, and they do the work, right?
Mm,
And so this has helped us to keep the partnerships a little smaller than the opportunities we have. And but as we walk through these, we form new partnerships because we have new people coming, new talents, new institutions who write us to be partners, and we see what we can create
yeah.
together. And so yeah, so we've managed to be as equitable as possible,
Mm.
not minding that there are also power dynamics that do come into play every now and again.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about power dynamics, what do you think is one barrier that you're most determined to break down?
Wow. I think the barrier would be that I think from a global north perspective, even within Africa, we need
Yeah,
to start seeing Africans and scientists and Africans in general as co-creators of knowledge.
yeah.
Not just recipients of knowledge or innovations, but those actually who are extremely talented, capable of creating the solutions that are required within Africa, right?
Yeah.
And even as an African, we have to start to change our mindset where we have adopted a different mindset to
Mm,
know that we are capable. We can. Yes,
mm,
the systems may not quite support at a time due to all the challenges that are historical and all of that, but
mm,
really having that mindset that yes, we know our problems, and yes, we know the solutions, and yes, we can solve them. Maybe we don't have the resources, but we are creative enough to
mm,
start to find ways to support the work we do. So what we are doing with JR Biotek Foundation, we haven't had that whoop moment of like funding has come, boom, right?
mm,
But we've been working for the last 10, 11 years, utilizing what we have,
mm,
the talents within, the in-kind support, some funding that we get. But more so now is that we're being really creative about how we generate resources to support the work we do. So then the work we do will remain sustainable. We can be as independent as possible. So the barrier we need to break is that of the mindset. We need to first of all know that we are capable. Yes, we can address all these problems that we're seeing in Africa around the area of hunger and poverty. Of course, there is the role of the government, but also the individual. We can do what we can when we can. And so, what I want to see, honestly, is first of all, shattering these barriers, knowing that we can use what we have. And we do have a lot. We have a lot of resources. We have human capacity. We have talent. We have
Mm.
what we need there. What we now need to do is, again, like I said, creating platforms that allow people to come together, co-create, and
Yeah.
utilize what we have to create what we need.
Absolutely. And one of that platforms is the My Science Journey platform. So if you haven't joined My Science Journey, this is your call to join as well. I'm going to take a pause from my questions, Carol, and take a few questions from the YouTube channel. We have a question from Lillian. She says, with the decline of indigenous foods, how do we balance protecting biodiversity while also innovating with climate resilient crops?
Yeah, absolutely. So even at our work, AGRIIP, really, the focus is on indigenous crops, African crops. So all this work we're doing support 10 million farmers, 1,000 launch 1,000 sustainable ventures is all around African indigenous crops, the crops of the people. That's what I call it. These are the crops that are central to the livelihoods of the African communities and nations. And so we have to balance it, right? First of all, do we actually know what is indigenous to Africa? And I'm not saying that other crops don't matter. There are traditional crops that have, come in through migration and all kinds of things that have become traditional to the African people. However, what we need to think is what is currently happening now is that there's quite a lot of focus on the imported crops, like the cereal crops, the rice, the maize, the wheat for most of Africa. Well, some parts of Africa maybe that is very relevant, but some parts where farmers, when you talk about growing rice, because I studied rice was in my PhD, I studied that for you to grow rice, you require a lot.
Hmm.
Right. For you to grow rice, you need land, enough land. You need water. You need pesticides. You need agrochemicals. You need fertilizers.
Hmm.
These are things that you need the tools. You need the technologies now to be able to get enough that can actually produce what is enough for you to sell or for you to
Hmm.
sort of earn a decent livelihood. How many smallholder farmers in Africa actually have that capacity?
Yeah.
To grow rice. Now, when you come to wheat, there are countries like even parts of Nigeria in the north, they grow
Hmm.
wheat. And before, because of the climate was quite okay, hadn't changed as drastically as today, they could produce wheat. But now many of the smallholder farmers are struggling. Why? Because unlike rice that requires more humid temperatures, wheat likes more sort of a subtle temperatures. And now they're struggling to grow that. So how is it that the crops we're not able to grow by our millions of smallholder farmers in a way that is enough and sustainable be our staple crops? So
Hmm.
that's where I talk about mindset change. We need to start to look at those things that we have adopted as ours that actually aren't quite sustainable, especially looking at climate change. So yes, there are ways to do that. First of all, is we need to map our crops. What is indigenous to Africa? What do we have left? Actually, there are crops that are indigenous to Africa or African communities have been central to the culture, to the language, to how people live and how people. But then, do we actually know what they are? Those that have disappeared, do we have an idea of the ones that have disappeared? We no longer see. There are crops we used to eat when I was little. Now, if you go there, you don't see them. And
Hmm.
some of them you see them now, you can't even buy them because they're so out of reach. But also biodiversity, what does that mean to the African farmer? What does that mean to the African community? I think we need to also, again, recreate narratives around our own questions, our own challenges, and be able to find ways to address that. Yes. I don't know if I answered that question, but there's so much
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you did and even gave more to that, which I really appreciate. And just as a follow-up to that, from David, speaking of imported crops, what's your perspective on GMO adoption? What do you think it is, and do you think it is a threat to Africa's indigenous biodiversity?
Well, I think because the GMO thing has been co-opted politically,
Yeah.
I try to be careful now what I say. As a
Yeah.
scientist, GMO, I understand the biology behind
Yeah.
GMOs and genetically modified crops and how that is produced.
Train from Kermac
Scientist, I
259.
know that whatever technology you put out, whether it's through crops or whatever, there has to be a level of safety, right? That has to be tested. There has to be testing, toxicology testing, all of that before it goes to consumers and the masses. So I would say that. But on the other hand, my
Mm.
problem with Africa and GMO and the whole thing is, okay, well, there are many ways and many technologies that we can use to harness our
Yeah.
crops or crop yields, right? GMO is one area. But then
Mm.
we look at it has its advantages, it has its disadvantages, just like other technologies. What Africa as a continent, again, when we say Africa is a huge continent with many countries, perhaps if we go country by country, is that individual African countries need to sit and look at their priorities. What is of priority to us? What crops are of priority to us? Now we have the cash crops that are, for economic reasons or high there, but there are staple crops that are important for nutrition. We have to sort of think more broadly of what really matters to Africa when it comes to food sovereignty, food security, food systems. And then we start to see where the challenges, the gaps are, and how to fill them. So
Mm.
for indigenous crops are largely native still. There, a lot of them have not been um, uh, sort of what will I say well, there has been domestication happening naturally, but a lot of them have not been sort of scientifically modified or stuff like that, will I say. And that's because again it comes back to the fact that there is a historic underfunding of African R&D in general
Mm.
and
Mm.
agriculture research and development. How much money is actually even within African countries, how
Mm.
much are they contributing to
Mm.
research and development, and how much is a global from a global perspective are they contributing to improving Africa's agricultural research and development sector in that area. So if you talk about GMO and labs in Africa are not able to modify their own crops how they want it with the traits that they want, and you have to import it from outside, I have a problem with that. And
Mm.
that's because then who are we buying the seeds from, and how is that helping the farmer? Do they
Mm.
have the resources to continue to buy, whether it's GMO or other crops? My advocacy is for African governments and development partners to look at supporting infrastructure development in African research institutions, in African universities, where the next generation of leaders are trained. If we had our labs that are standard, we have our scientists being funded, they are intelligent. They will create solutions to the problem. So even if the GMO is made in an Africa, at least they know it's there and they know it can cut costs for you can, but I'm not even just talking about GMOs. I'm talking about now the hardest in African crops and looking at biodiversity, our soils, improving those so then we can improve yields. There are so many avenues. So
Yeah.
going in one direction for me, and when it becomes politicized, becomes a problem. And so
Yeah.
we need to sort of look at different ways of doing science. There are
Mm.
ways where you don't need too much technology, but you can
Yeah.
actually start to address some issues around the soil, the climate, and how farmers can adopt technologies or tools, right? Even access to finance. Maybe that's all the farmer is looking for, not
Mm.
seed, but actually how to sort of give them a little bit more land,
Yeah.
space, give them a little bit of finance. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what they're asking because they have their seeds, they know what they are, they know where they get them from. Maybe that's it. So it's a complicated thing, but I think
Mm.
we need to set our priorities like, but with us from JR Biotek Foundation, AGRIIP, we're taking this conversation seriously. We're working in-house with African scientists, with those in the diaspora, and also other partners out here in the global north who believe in our vision and who are supporting to do what we can, one community at a time. And
Fine.
that
Yeah.
way we can get it right in some form. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna come back to Lillian's question because you mentioned funding, and she asked because previously you had talked about lack of sustainable funding for researchers. So what is the innovative funding or partnerships models do you think would help bridge this gap?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the countries, right? The institutions and how their funding comes in the first place. So who funds research institutions in X country? And how is it? What is the research spending like? Those questions, I think, has to come, you have to come from those who make those decisions, right? I don't know if I'm understanding it, but I think also
Mm,
a lot of not a lot, at least a few universities that I know in Nigeria and so on, are being more creative in the way that they source um generate resources, right? Financial resources to support some of the work that they are doing. Innovation will always be needed, right? We have to, when you talk about science, you talk about innovation,
mm,
finding ways to boost or drive innovation at the grassroots is important as well. Within the universities at the PhD level, postdoc, what types of innovation are relevant and practical within the universities or institutions there? And how can they be harnessed in a way that they're tackling challenges within the countries, within the continent, but also globally, right? There are always avenues to sort of yeah, get those innovations to sort of attract resources in some way. But I don't know if I'm even answering this question right, Ruth.
mm.
I think yeah, it's
Yeah, I think it's food for thought because I think this is a very big problem
yeah,
for everyone. So
yeah.
yeah. Thank you for that, Carol. And I don't think there's any more questions for now, and we are also running out of time. But we have a comment from David who says, "I really love the concept of co-creation. I believe that it is what makes solutions truly acceptable and enables successful adoption at the community level." So
Exactly.
just for you to note that. And as we wrap up, Carol, I would like to ask you something that is more personal because I know leading at this scale can be very intense. How are you able to sustain your own energy and to ensure that in the face of challenges you stay resilient?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big question because yeah, honestly, my faith helps me a lot. I journal, I pray, I reflect a lot now. Before I was younger and I had so much energy. I still have energy, but it's yeah, biology happens, it changes over time, and then priorities change. The
Yeah.
way you see life kind of changes, as you go along, the way you see situations or challenges also, and how you are called to sort of bring to help to address some of those challenges. Also, we it evolves. So I'm at a point right now where I've over 10 years having learned a lot of lessons, having seen a lot of challenges, and it's easy to give up because especially if you look at the level of how much work needs to be done and how things sometimes don't seem like they're moving or shifting, you can give up. But to be honest, I think the way that I stay connected to the cause is because um, I don't know how this passion came and it overwhelmed me and it is not leaving me. And so if it hasn't left and it's not leaving me and it's not letting me sleep well when I try to leave it, then I might as well, then I'm called to do it. So I really sort of find ways to balance my work and other parts of my life through connecting to my faith, staying positive, and yeah, looking for the right people and surrounding yourself with the right people, really. What are people you work with, people who
Mhm.
inspire you, because we all need that. um,
Mm.
and staying true to the cause. It can be very challenging, particularly if you're in one place looking to lead, the next generation in another place. And sometimes there is a misconception of how this work should be done.
Mm.
And yeah, it can be quite challenging, but I do derive joy in the little wins and the progress that I see. I mean, Ruth, I see you, and I remember when we met, and I see you have set up this massive, wonderful platform, very impactful, very positive. These are the things that give me joy. And you can imagine there are others as well. And so the little seeds we sow and how those produce fruit in other people, how they utilize them
Yeah,
to be a blessing to other people, that keeps me going. It's
absolutely.
too short. And I think sometimes if we would stop and think, how would I want to be remembered when I'm gone? I think
Mm.
once, every now and again, we should stop and ask that question. For me,
Mm.
I do. And whenever I think, what should I, and that will sort of reinvigorate something else and keep my eyes on the ball. Like, this is what I'm called to do. And I don't want it to die with me. I want it to outlive me. So what is
Mm.
it that I should be doing now? Who should I be impacting? Who should I mentor so then the work carries on beyond me? Because it's not,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know how to say, but I think you understand that.
I totally agree. I mean, creating ripple effects is very important, and I think you've done that really well, Carol. And yeah, to just congratulate you on that as well. And as we wrap up, just coming back to agriculture innovation, um, what areas do you think excite you the most in terms of agricultural innovation, especially in the African continent?
Yeah, I just there's a lot.
Yeah,
Agriculture is it's actually the core, like being what would I say, a really crucial, critical, important sector in Africa's history, right? And so even now, I think it's one of the largest contributors to Africa's GDP.
yeah,
For countries is agriculture, subsistence agriculture and agriculture. So there's quite a lot of room for innovations at every level, from the farming communities all the way to the labs, to the policy and all of that.
yeah,
So I'm excited because it's an area that is not just one area, one dimension, is multidimensional. It is quite broad, and is an area that is key to life.
yeah,
Without food,
yeah,
food
yeah,
can't live, I
yeah,
guess, right?
yeah,
So really, it is so central like that, that food is important. We can't live
yeah,
without food, right?
yeah,
And so a lot of also health issues that we have in many African countries, which are diet related, non-communicable diseases, we have diabetes and all of that also associate with food. So now you're talking about food that is enough, that is satisfying, but also food that is healthy, right?
yeah.
For nutrition purposes and so on. So it excites me that agriculture is that sector that will always be. But also what really makes me a little sad sometimes is how we have so much opportunity in Africa. We have
Mm.
land, we have talent, we have the indigenous knowledge, how farming has been done over centuries and all of that. And yet we're still struggling to eat that is
Mm.
enough, that is healthy. Yeah, that really breaks me. And I think that's what keeps me going and drives us as an organization. So there is excitement because there are tons of opportunities to
Mm.
make a difference, to create new innovations that will revolutionize agriculture. But we need to bring that moral, ethical lens into it, because I think now it's become an area of opportunity and everybody's trying to grab or do stuff. But are we actually thinking of the lives that are really connected to this thing that we are doing?
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Well, and I'd like for us to end on that note as a food for thought for everyone to think about. Are we really connecting? And are we really thinking about this as well? In as much as everyone is focusing on different things. And to just appreciate you, Dr. Carol, for taking the time to speak to us about your leadership journey and about the projects that you've been pushing with the JR Biotek Foundation. Thank you so much. And hopefully, in the next few years, we're going to be celebrating more incredible things that will come up from the AGRIIP project
absolutely.
as part of the JR Biotek Foundation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruth. It's such a great honor to be here today. I couldn't miss it for anything. And I just wish you all the best. Keep going. You are doing incredible things. And I'm so, so super proud of you. And wish you all the very best in the journey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carol. I truly appreciate that, especially coming from you. I truly appreciate it. And just to appreciate everyone that has also joined us online. Remember, you can always get this conversation later on. You can go back on YouTube. It's still there, publicly available. But thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you on the next My Science Journey episode. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, we are
Okay.
off.
Are we off? Because it's still